I get that feeling of two kids running around raising heck every day.
Yes. Now I have to get my house back in order. Two boys running around with Nerf guns and
oh man,
all kinds of madness.
We get that. So, okay, I got some pop up on Discord here. Okay. I really need to get the quiet keyboard switches for a mechanical keyboard.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Can you guys hear a chicken?
Well, unfortunately, no.
Awesome. Okay, because I came to the quietest room I have available, and of course, I have chickens in the backyard, and they just started making a massive ruckus, and I'm like, I wasn't sure if my mic would pick that up.
I was gonna say,
How many do you have? Oh, sorry.
How many do you have?
I have chickens.
How many? How many do you have?
Oh, 8.
Oh, wow.
It's
awesome.
kind of like a cooperative chicken thing with 2 neighbors behind me. We all share the eggs. So
nice.
It's a lot of chickens for one backyard, but I had room for a big run. So it's just, it was that or the lawn company would show up to mow, I'm sure, while we do this. So.
Oh, God.
Okay, that works better. Zoom always forgets my microphone arrangements.
So do you just next screen for us?
Yes.
Under this arrangement? Okay.
Just about to ask that cat things. I'm like, oh, it's Mitch driving. That's better.
Yes.
Awesome.
I got everything loaded up on an IU Health laptop that Derek lets me have full access on.
Awesome. Okay. I wondered how this was going to work.
Yep.
Very cool.
Do they announce us? I haven't attended one of these before, so.
The stream's live, so okay. We're live. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Mitch Parker from Indiana University Health, and who'd like to go next? Introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Katrin Robinson with Indiana University Health as well, in change management.
And I am Jackie Davis, also from IU Health, and I do all things process improvement.
And today our presentation is going to be on building rapport, and a little bit of background. This is not your traditional information security presentation. So big part of what we do in our organization is we always try and look for better ways for our information security team to reach out to our customers and to get better response, because ultimately the vast number of attacks that organizations see are based upon pretty low-tech attacks that people report in. We want people to report in more attacks, because the attacks we don't see could be ones that could be very damaging tomorrow. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Jackie for part one. So go right ahead, Jackie.
All right. Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate it. So as Mitch mentioned, what we're after is creating an environment where people feel open to share things that are happening in the cyberspace. Of course, we want them to say what's wrong, what's happening. Do I see something? Say something. But we're talking about, and a little bit different angle here today, about underserved populations, and are we hearing them? Are we setting up this environment where people feel comfortable speaking? So I'm going to start with some data. So in 2020, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked information security and analyst population. Now, they don't track across the board every single role. So think of this in just a sample of the overall information security population, looking specifically at the analyst. The Bureau also does not track every single nationality, background, role, what have you. So we're looking specifically from the underserved population, we're looking at Black and African American and Hispanic or Latino. So in 2020, 11.9% of the analysts, information security analyst population, 11.9% were Black or African American, 15.8% were Hispanic or Latino. Just 5 years prior to that, not a ton of time here, 5 years prior, Black and African American was only 3%, and 5.2% for Hispanic or Latino. Pretty significant jump in 5 years. Next slide, Mitch. So I think arguably there's a lot more population, there's a bigger population of underserved team members working in the information security space. So with that, there's just a greater need for awareness of what this population, what we have to deal with, what we have to unpack in this space. So coming with BIPOC population, it's just a lot of history, tons of just inequality, tons of just lack of trust. So when we're trying to make the environment one that people feel as though they're open, or that there's an open population, or excuse me, open environment where they can feel free to share all of themselves and feel as though they're going to have a fair shake in this space, there just needs to be a greater awareness of the challenges that underserved team members have faced to date. By the time they get to you, there's just tons of history that they themselves have faced, and even more deeper history that their people have faced inside of workplaces and outside. And I think we can all appreciate that you don't leave your experiences outside of the workplace outside. They don't stay at home. You bring all of that with you into work. So there just needs to be a greater awareness for what challenges have been faced. This, you don't have to go far. Nowadays, the media makes it quite open to what's happening in spaces. Now, some of that you have to sift through, but there's just a ton of history there for what these underserved populations have faced. And there just needs to be a greater awareness. We need to just look up on what exactly they face to date. There, step forward to that though, an acknowledgement of those barriers. So if there's something you haven't experienced yourself, it can be difficult to understand that, yes, that's real. There just needs to be an open-mindedness to say, yes, I understand these barriers that you face and I hear you. To that, being objective and listening, just really trying to just peel away all the subjectivity, all of the just misunderstandings, and just really objectively listen to team members' experiences. What are they experiencing inside of the workplace and outside? In order to do that, though, in order to get people to talk, there needs to be trust. We have to make sure we are ones who listen and don't judge, ones that keep things confidential, that should be confidential, ones that do what we say. There needs to be that trustworthiness in place in order to even get people to talk to me. Next slide, Mitch. Thank you. All right, so Claudia Bryn-Woody. So Claudia is the Vice President and Managing Director of Intellectual Property at IBM. She is also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. She's also served as keynote speaker in numerous talks across the world in this space. She had a great quote that just fits this talk very well. Inclusivity means not just we're allowed to be there, but we are valued. She says, I've always said smart teams will do amazing things, but truly diverse teams will do impossible things. I pulled this quote specifically because she pointed out a very key point. We are not inclusive just because our numbers have grown. That does not mean we're inclusive. We can't hold ourselves up as being an inclusive workplace just because numbers have grown. But are we making those people who have been underserved, those people who have not had great numbers in our space, do they feel valued? That previous slide helps them feel valued. Are they heard? Do they feel as though their stories are being really heard and action is being taken accordingly? But great quote from Claudia. If you have not crossed her path or haven't seen anything from her, just a great ambassador, if you will, for the underserved. Next slide, Mitch. Thank you. All right, so we talked about the numbers being better. But again, going a little bit deeper here, do you appreciate the experiences that underserved team members have experienced and the value that they bring? We know diversity in thought is extremely valuable, and underserved team members have had experiences that they bring with them to the workplace that has extremely great value. Do we appreciate that? Are we really digging in and understanding what they have to share, and are we considering that valuable? Again, hearing their stories. There are stories to be told inside the workplace and outside, but you have to dig deep. It's really, when we're talking about stories, what you're really after is, how did this experience that the underserved team member faced, how did it make them feel? And how did that experience, did it change anything about them? There's the experiences that they felt, have they're holding back? Do they feel as though it's not safe to talk? Is it not safe to share things that they feel are wrong, things they feel are risky? Have we closed them off? We have to really hear the stories and value the stories and make them understand that their stories are heard in order to create this environment where they really feel open to talk. So with that, this environment, can they learn? Can they grow? Can they advance? Or are we holding them back? Are we overlooking them? Are we overlooking the great value that they bring, and making them feel as though they're in a place where they can learn, grow, and advance? And lastly, are your eyes open to injustice, to inequality? Do you know what that looks like? It's really digging into really understand what that looks like and being able to see it in what we call, we've termed this word, but microaggressions. But do you know what that looks like? And I'm not a big fan of microaggression. I think aggression is aggression, but do you know what that looks like? And really, do you take it a step further, which we'll go a little bit deeper here next, is, do you do anything about it? Next slide. So to that end, being an ally, we use that term so loosely, but really, do we know what it really means to be an ally? Meaning, to be an ally means to unite or form a connection or relation between yourself and another group. So we're asking you today to challenge yourself. Are you a true ally to the underserved? Meaning, you're not just one that understands the experiences. You may appreciate the experiences, but have you formed a connection or a relation with the underserved? And are you an active or passive ally? We like allies, right? It's great to have an ally. It's better to have one that's active, that sees something and says something, that has the power to change something and says, I'm going to do so. So are you active or passive? All right, Mitch.
Thank you very, very much, Jackie. And again, a little bit of background. I've been at IU Health for almost 5 years. And before that, I spent 8 years at Temple Health in Philadelphia. In both cases, I spent a lot of time working directly with customers on security incidents and getting them reported in. And one of the big challenges I found over the past 13 years when doing investigations of phishing incidents was I had large groups of people that were reporting these incidents in and others that didn't. And I wanted to find out more about those that didn't and did a lot of research here. And the big thing that came up was that a lot of team members, they just don't feel comfortable reporting these in. And in a lot of organizations, retaliation is a very, very serious concern for people. They believe that if they report an insecurity incident, they're going to get blamed for it. And what further compounds this is that there are no specific federal statutes that protect people that report in cybersecurity issues. So, say, for example, I report in a large issue that leads to a multi-million dollar data breach. There is no protection for me under federal law. And that discourages people from doing so. And let's be very clear, there are local and state statutes, but the cost of a ransomware attack, cost of a data breach these days gets into federal territory really, really quickly. And you're not going to be there for state and local. You're going to be dealing federal. And again, no protection. People don't feel like they can report these in. And it's one more reason of many. And also, building on what Jackie said, people don't really trust their leadership teams. I'm going to come right out and say it. They don't want to report any issues because they're afraid senior leadership's going to retaliate. They're afraid some senior vice president's going to get upset because you destroyed their pet project. And with the size of the IT community and the size of the security community, there's a significant concern about people reporting insecurity issues because they're afraid of losing their jobs and they're afraid of not being able to work elsewhere in the industry. I mean, if you thought the security community was small, it is. And there's people that are scared to talk about security incidents because of it because they're afraid they won't get a job anywhere else. And again, building again to the lack of applicable federal statute to protect whistleblowers, people are not going to report in issues the way you would like them to because, again, we're dealing with the issue. Senior leadership in many organizations, the trust is just not there. And the legal protection to report in, you can get all sorts of protection if you report in accounting issues like the woman at Enron did. However, you're not going to get them for cybersecurity. So, took a look at my friends over at the Society for Human Resources Management, better known in the HR community as SHRM. And again, building on what's out there, when HR professionals were asked if the question of race-based discrimination exists in the workplace, we have a pretty big dichotomy here. 13% of white human resources professionals agree, and 49% black HR professionals think it exists. And when you ask the workforce the same question, 35% of black workers affirm this, but only 7% of white workers affirm this. This is a further issue, meaning you're not trusting leadership when HR themselves believes that discrimination could lead to issues. You've got a serious problem. And the one that's been in the news recently has been Dr. Timnit Gebru over at, who was formerly of Google, who had pointed out issues in their AI algorithms. One of the big challenges there, she reported these in, got reassigned, and subsequently let go by Google. And this has caused massive outcry in the AI and intelligence systems community, in addition to the tech community, because of how she was treated. And again, the gigantic allegation is she would have been treated different had she been white. Let's call it exactly for what it is. So, doing some further research, we took a look at Protocol Magazine. In their article, How Tech HR Departments Fail Black and Brown Employees, the following concerns were noted in the article. First of all, HR existing to preserve the company, not the individual team members. Questioning and harassment of team members that report issues in. This is something that I will tell you, I have not seen at my current employer. I have not seen this at my previous employer. Have I seen this elsewhere in the industry? All over the place. And issues being reported in being minimized or ignored? Yes, this exists a lot more than people think. And people asking impacted employees for burden of proof. That also significantly exists. And I've seen this at all levels. Again, we work to ensure these issues do not occur at IU Health. I've worked to ensure they do not occur at other organizations I've worked at, and we've always treated our customers correctly. However, in the industry wide, this is an issue. And there is a very big fear that reporters will be accused of creating them or ignored. Have I had to undo a few situations where technical managers have actually gone after people for reporting security incidents? Yes, I have. Did it go well for the manager trying to cover their own butt? Absolutely not. And I made sure of it. But the point is, it happens. And it causes people to not want to report these issues in. And if you're a minority in the workplace, you don't want to report these in because they're going to do whatever, some people are going to do whatever they can to make you look bad and get you fired. And the example of Dr. Gebru, formerly of Google, is an example of that. So we look at it this way. When you take a look at what originally started as an issue of trying to find out why my customers were not reporting insecurity issues after seeing that they had actually received phishing emails, we discovered we didn't have a security reporting problem. We have a larger trust problem. We have a huge trust problem, and it's got significant dimensions to it. And we have to address it for exactly what it is. If you're a minority and you report in a security incident, people are afraid it's the end of their careers. And that means that information security bears the burden of not being trusted by their own team. So we have to take a look at it as we have to address these trust issues before we address the security ones because people aren't going to report in issues for security. Heck, they're not going to report on a broken light bulb if they think there's going to be a problem. And I look at it this way. The best threat intelligence an organization has is its own team. The IU Health Information Security Team's stated goal is to have customers call us first. If they see something, say something, call us. I get up in front of audiences with my entire organization and tell them, you need to call us. We will believe you. And the reason why we do that is because with the new number and types of attacks that you see these days, they're not going for emailing a whole bunch of people. They're emailing one or two. They're trying every little angle they can to get in based on who you are and what you have access to. And there's a lot of people with access to cash. There's a lot of people with access to systems. They're trying whatever they can and it's targeted. So making sure that those people can call us is critically important. And I'm going to call out upper management here. They've had opportunities. Have they succeeded? No, they haven't. The reason why? Because it hasn't been made a priority for upper management. So, what's been the priority? Priorities for upper management in terms of this have been about awards, platitudes, and trying to get on the best employer lists and trying to say you're the employer of choice. That's been the goal of a lot of people. One of my professors at Temple University, Mike Guglielmo, actually gave the advice that if you saw an employer trying to get on the employer of choice list or talk about being a best employer, they probably weren't. And he's been proven right. So, got to hand it to Mike. And what's been happening? What are the priorities been also? It's been about developing the workforce, leading through example, or leveraging our teams. That's just not been there. It's about individualism. And a lot of the leadership and development programs or psych assessments used to vet people for senior leaders positions in organizations They don't cover diversity, equity, or inclusion, or dealing with discrimination. It's not there. None of it. And I've taken those tests repeatedly. In addition to that, I've taken the classes that teach you how to create those tests. So it's not there. And also, a lot of senior leaders make their careers about themselves. Why? Because the incentive system is based on their individual experiences. And so what we see is a lot of minimization of issues. And I'm going to specifically call out All Lives Matter here for that. And I'm also going to say a big trend I've seen with a lot of senior leaders has been to minimize experiences that are dissimilar to the paths that they took to get to where they are. And these people don't understand how that takes away the voice of the others, and specifically the voices of their teams. And also, many companies have had, I should say, very disparate reward systems. They reward condescending managers that talk themselves up, that'll throw anyone under the bus. This is something that I've seen repeatedly in my career. The people that do the most bus throwing are the ones that get ahead. And realistically, if it's not a metric that's on their performance matrix, it's not something they care about. And trust in a lot of places isn't there. So we have a bigger issue, and that is people that are in charge are not measured, they don't measure this. So that's where we got to start. So today I'm going to give some rules for security leaders. First rule, you serve and lead by example. I had a good talk with my boss last week, had my one-on-one actually, and the first thing I said to him is, I do what I do in this organization and I push the way I push. And the reason why is because if my team doesn't see me doing it, they're not going to do it. So you do this. And you have to be in a servant leadership mindset because you have to empower, you have to uplift your team members, you have to be in that level. If you do not have these two things, I will guarantee every initiative you have, especially DE and I ones, are going to fail. I will guarantee it. I will bet money on it, and I will win. And be very clear about this. The information security mindset of being based on superiority, being condescending to others, or putting others down. If you do this, you are not in a position to hold your position. You are not a leader, and you are not going to champion these initiatives because what you're going to do is going to backfire and people are going to leave the organization because of you. I'm calling exactly what I've seen. This is how it works. So, what do you want to do? You want to educate yourself, find out what your current situation is. Take the time to talk to your team members, take the time to talk to your organization, find out what's going on, and don't talk. You listen, you take notes, you assess, and you take the time to understand the stories you're being told. And this isn't security. You're not being grilled on how well you know Nmap or SIMs or encryption. Don't try and prove you're an expert. You know why? You're not. You're not going to be. And the second you think you're an expert, your hubris takes over, you become a bad leader, and you're out. Don't let hubris get the best of you. This is about listening, understanding your customers, and educating yourself so that you can better meet their needs. And very specifically over the past couple of years, and I'm going to come right out and say, ever since I started in my organization, I've taken the time to sit down, sometimes for hours at a time, with my team members to listen to them, listen to their stories, listen to their struggles, because this is something that's taken national prominence because of numerous large incidents over the past several years. However, it doesn't mean it didn't exist. And we have to understand it's existed. These situations have been brought to light. We have to listen so we can better respond to meet our team's needs. And more importantly, be yourself. So, and what you need to do is after you talk to everyone, look at the services that your team undertakes. Take a look at what you can do to do them better and examine how you can improve communication using everything you've learned as a goal. So I'm going to give a real life example. I write my own security training. Reason why I write it is because I don't trust what the companies put out there. Also because I spend a lot of time listening to my customers. And when I'm sat down with medical record clerks that are living in bad neighborhoods that make $12 an hour, tell me how they saved up for 6 months to buy their son a computer, you realize they're not going out to Best Buy to spend a lot of money on antivirus. You have to adapt what you're doing for the people that can't afford. You have to adapt for your environment. And your communication and communication plans have to reflect the needs of your people, what they need and their experiences. And if they don't do that, I'm going to tell you they're going to go, nice cartoon, and they're going to throw it out. And so, what you want to do is you want to use communication and education as part of your improvement. Treat what you learned from speaking with your team like a risk management plan. Plan it out, articulate it, talk about it. And I can't say this enough, talk about it whenever you can with your team. You have to make it constant because if you don't, your team's going to think, oh, it's another month, something else. We'll talk about bagels next. No, that's counter to the goals of what we're trying to do. So with that, you've got to go that extra mile. You need to make yourself available. Everyone has your cell phone. Knows how to get a hold of you, and you make yourself available because ultimately your team's success is predicated upon how well you respond when people need you. And there's something I always say to my teams. You deal with customers when they are not having good days. And it is extra important for you to do so. And so with that, we focus on improving our processes for intake, triage, and response because of that. AKA, you always believe everyone, you always research, you always make sure the right people are triaging it so you don't bounce people around from queues or have them go to the dead letter office. And you always respond with clear communication and make sure those improvements address those preconceived biases that a lot of people have, and quite frankly, a significant amount of minorities have with dealing with information security. You have to have this in your training communication plans, and you can't assume everyone's the same. Not everyone is like you. Not everyone is like our techie friends. We have to adapt, but to adapt, we have to listen, we have to learn, we have to make every attempt to understand. And I'm going to say something else out. This is something that I've seen that disturbs me in this field. I don't like using the word ally because to me it's a 25-cent word that sits on top of actions. People don't care about words. People care about, well, what are you doing? In the infamous words of Miss Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? That's what it comes down to. So, and also trying to prove by negation that somebody didn't have the experiences that they did because you've never seen it or your personal experiences are counter, that doesn't get rid of the issues. It actually makes them worse. And it shows you to be willfully ignorant because it shows you to only care about your point of view, not theirs. And that's something we can't have. And also, I look at it this way, and this is again a discussion I always have on my team. When you only celebrate once a year, you ignore people the other 11 months. And yes, I am referring to Pride Month and I am referring to Black History Month. We can do better than this because, again, if it's for 1 month, people are going to think, what month is next for me to be ignored for until the next year rolls around again. That's not how it works. So, also going to come right out and say something else. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to have issues. So, you've got to be really careful about what you say and do so you don't perpetuate them. You will have them. But more importantly, you're going to have to deal with them. And I tell people, especially in the security field, especially in my position, you're not judged on whether a security incident happened or not. You're not judged on that. You're judged on how well you recover and how well you help the organization be resilient. Here, you're going to be judged on how resilient you are and how well you help address these issues. issues happen. This is why you have partners across the organization. This is why you talk to your teams, because you're not going to resolve these teams by going in yourself. You're going to resolve these issues by talking with your team, talking through them, and resolving them. And also, even if someone is a member of a group or a minority, or they're not perfect. Everyone has their own biases. Even Insane Clown Posse said this back on the song Halls of Illusions. Everyone's got their own view of the world. You have to recognize this. Not everyone is the same. Also have to recognize this, and you have to approach it differently. So, in other words, listening is more important than anything else to be able to understand and recognize these and come up with different approaches. lot of lot of good things we can do. We just have to do them better. And when you have these issues, it's not about going into yourself or wishing they go away. If you don't openly and confront and address these issues, they're not going to get resolved. And I'm going to say something else here. Silence is approval. If you go into yourself, you don't respond, and you wait and you don't call it out immediately, people are going to think you approve. And if you say something later, people are going to think you got told that you didn't like it. So I'm going to say something here that might get me in a little trouble. If you wait for the corporate point of view, that's also considered silence. And I can tell you, I've seen so many people who revealed their characteristics to me by going, "Oh, I don't know what to say about that. I have to wait to say what someone upstairs says." No. You know what that shows you are? It doesn't show you're a person, it shows you're a puppet. And that's not acceptable. So if you're not out there openly saying something, if you're not addressing these issues when they happen, and if you're saying, "I have to wait," then what you're doing is you're ignoring people and you're making it worse. Please, I beg of you, don't do this. And ultimately, us as leaders have to set this example. Our goal is to build trust. My goal here is to build an information security organization so that customers feel comfortable talking to us about things they discover in the course of their jobs that could affect how patients are cared for at IU Health. That is my job. If we are not able to effectively mitigate risks to our patients, I have no business being in Indianapolis. And if we put things in the way of taking care of patients, or we put biases, we put anything in the way, we're not doing our job. And I might as well find something else. And with the huge amount of attacks that we have to be better at doing this because we're losing intelligence on these attacks because people don't want to report these issues into us. People are scared to report them in. They're afraid of retaliation. They know there's no federal protection for cybersecurity whistleblowers. And to be very clear, threat intel that you get from the threat intelligence companies is not going to tell you about these attacks. It's not going to tell you about robocalls. It's not going to tell you about spear phishing. Your customers, your team members that you need to build trust in, they are the ones that tell you that. And the best security resources we have, we already work with them. You're not going to spend $1 million to get a product that's going to replace somebody who calls you up and lets you know every time something hits a clinical chair's mailbox. And I'm not speaking a theoretical, I'm speaking true experience. We need to have better collaboration and better trust. And we have to have this. We have to address these issues because if we don't, we are ignoring not only a large portion of our population, we're also putting the organization and the patients we care for at risk. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Kat, and thank you all.
Thank you, Mitch. Hello, everyone. I'm Katrin, and I'm going to give a perspective as a team member, not a leader. And I'm going to give that perspective based on over 20 years I've spent working in the IT space within pharmaceuticals, medical device, and healthcare. And I can tell you that over the course of time that I've been working in IT, in most meetings I attend, I'm very aware that I'm the only non-straight member. I'm also usually one of 2 or 3 women, Most of the time, to be honest, though, because of the areas in which I work in operations and security, I'm the only woman. This has not drastically changed, despite the numbers we're seeing, in the area that I sit. This experience has actually stayed fairly consistent in my own experience. As such, I'm very careful about how I present myself. I try not to be too girly. I try not to be too dykey. I try not to be too much overall. Essentially, I'm really careful how I present myself because I have to be careful about that. Work is not a safe place to do that. And I'm just saying it straight out. Work is not a safe place to be myself. Okay, next slide. So the numbers are better, but that picture's a macro picture overall. In our own area that we work, as a team member, I would ask you, do you know about team members who don't share your life experience? Are they comfortable sharing their stories with you? Maybe you don't know that life experience because they're being really, really careful about what they reveal about themselves. Are you ever a witness to intolerance, injustice, or inequality? And this may be inside work or outside of work, not in your position as a leader, but just observing your neighbors or at a restaurant or what have you. And has that experience ever made you uncomfortable? Uncomfortable because you didn't know what to do. You wish you had said or done something. I am the hero of every story I replay in my head a few hours later when I come up with that great thing I was going to say. So if that is a wish you have and you've been uncomfortable, there is something you can do. Next slide. One way to do something is first you have to make the choice. And that's the choice to actively and visibly take a stand against harassment when you see it. In other words, I, as a team member and as a person, I'm asking you to lead by example. A great resource is an organization called Hollaback. It's a global people-powered movement to end harassment in all its forms. As they say in their mission statement, we believe that we all deserve to be who we are, wherever we are. It's extremely inclusive. I've included their address there, and bystander resources is a wonderful resource to use to review this. They also provide training on how you can help protect your neighbors, your family, your coworkers, pretty much anyone when you see bias and harassment collide in front of you. Next slide, please. So as a bystander resource that they provide, they have a system called the 5Ds. These are different methods that you can use to support someone who's being harassed. It emphasizes that harassment is not okay, and it demonstrates to the people in your life that they have the power to make our communities and workplaces safer. Don't underestimate the power of an individual in very small moments. The 5Ds are distract, delegate, document, delay, and direct. The first one, next slide, please, is distract. And this is, I will personally say, this is the easiest. It's actually one of the most effective because it works in a very small way, but it works with all the social norms that we're used to using. The idea behind distract is you see harassment going on and you distract. You distract not by having any sort of confrontation or giving notice to the person who's doing the harassment. You distract by reaching out to the person who's being harassed or interrupting the flow. So one way would be to, this person is being harassed and you ask them, oh, the time, and then you open up a conversation about something completely different. The important part is you ignore the harasser. And what that's tapping into is attention gives power. So even if we're all sitting on the bus, like in this picture, and you're pretending not to see it, the person doing it has harnessed the power of your silence as tacit approval. So this is subtle, but it's extremely strong. So when you ignore them and address the person being harassed as a person, you have validated them and invalidated the harasser. This is non-confrontational. They can usually pick up on it if they choose to, or you can even do something as subtle as like dropping your phone on the floor and then making a fuss picking it up and then like apologizing to them for dropping the phone and ignoring the person. It breaks the chain and it breaks the power of the silence of people feeling trapped that they're witnessing this happen. Next slide for the next D, please. The other option is to delegate. And this is usually effective in places like a store or a restaurant or a place where you can find someone who is in a position of authority. And that is where you can go to them and say, hey, this is happening. This would be if you've ever ridden on public transportation. It's where someone goes up and says to the bus driver, shit's going down in the back. It's basically getting the person who has authority involved. Now, a careful caveat about delegate is not involving the police immediately, because depending on what the harassment situation is, the person who's being harassed may be more worried about having an encounter with any sort of law enforcement or law official. But delegate is a great way to call attention to the fact that it's happening and have it officially addressed. Third slide, please, for the third D. Document. If you are uncomfortable actively getting involved, there is a way that you can document, because most of us have smartphones at this point. You have seen this over and over again in social media where something has been documented and it has been used to call attention to something. It's very helpful with a couple important caveats. You always need to make sure that the person who was harassed, they need to agree or they need to have the right to use it. It is definitely not cool to document something and share it or take it somewhere and use it without their permission, because essentially you have treated them with great disrespect by doing that. They're already feeling like they don't exist or that they're alone because of the harassment. If you do that without their okay and their control over it, you're actually furthering that trauma. Next slide, please. Delay. This is great for a lot of occasions when harassment happens, and literally it happens fast enough, or you weren't paying 100% attention and you're not even aware of what really went down until after it's happened. The graphic is great because it uses the stuff that happens by cars going by or bicyclists. Something happens, it's harassment, and before you can do or say anything, they're gone. But what you can do actually has a great impact. And that's why connecting with the person that was harassed and making sure, hey, are you okay? I witnessed that happening. That was not okay. Because what you've done is take, again, tacit or silence equals approval. Even if you're 100% not sure what just happened, asking the person validates them and says, hey, you're a person. I'm connecting with you. I'm concerned. Are you okay? What just happened? That didn't look okay. That gives them the chance to reconnect with people and not feel like they're alone and that no one else cares. So this can be a very powerful tool. So that point where you're kicking yourself, like, why didn't I say or do anything in the moment? You can do something as an individual, and it actually has a tremendous impact. Next slide, please. Direct. And before I even say anything about this, a note about safety. You don't ever want to get hurt trying to help someone out. You don't want to escalate the situation. So use direct very carefully. This is not a call out to be a hero, but it is possible to call out and use a direct form of interaction if you feel it's safe, if you feel it's warranted, and if you're sure that the person who's being harassed is going to be okay with that. And that would be as simple as directing a comment saying, hey, that's unacceptable. And basically calling out the behavior for what it is. That's sexual harassment. Hey, don't say that. That's harassment. But you have to be very careful with it, because if you are acknowledging the person doing it, you're also empowering them and you can escalate the situation. The person who's being harassed may also just want to get the heck out of there and get away from it because their safety is involved, and it could also impact your safety. So the next slide for the final D. Oh, that was it. Sorry. So the biggest point to remember with any of these is that you as an individual can do something, and that you have a lot of power as an individual because of your ability to connect and to affirm and to validate. At this time in our history, with everything that's been going on in the past few years, it's incredibly important that we show up for each other and that we're active bystanders, not just tacit witnesses who choose to ignore, which is essentially approving it. Research has shown that even a knowing glance, making eye contact with someone, can reduce the trauma for the person who is targeted, because you have formed a bond and you've sent a message that you saw what happened. So even if you're not sure what to say, it's perfectly okay to look at them and say, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Just reach out and make that connection and make sure they know that you see them as a person and that they're not alone. And that was my last slide, I believe.
And thank you all very, very much for coming today. We really, really do appreciate it. And again, have yourself a great rest of CircleCityCon.
Thank you all.